Thank you. Mr. Thomas, all yours.
I'd like to call the October 2018 meeting of the Real Estate Appraiser Commission back to order this day on Tuesday. First order of business is going to be to talk about the experience interviews. We're going to do that before we call the roll.
Let me go ahead and call the roll if
Please.
that's okay. Thank you. So this meeting is starting promptly at 10 o'clock, and I will go through our roll to make sure that we have a quorum. Ms. Rosemary Johnson was not able to be here with us. Mr. Randall Thomas.
Here.
Mr. Mark Johnston, also not able to be here with us. Dr. Warren McCara.
Here.
Mr. Rex Garrison.
Here.
Mr. Jim Atwood.
Here.
Mr. Jason Bennett.
Here.
Mr. Brett Mansfield.
Here.
And Ms. Michelle Alexander.
Here.
We have a quorum to proceed, and yes, you are correct. We would like to first, on your iPads, you have the information for our experience interviews and recommendations.
You have a page number?
49. Thank you. And we can proceed if you like, just each member read all of theirs at a time. Or
Okay. Mr. Atwood, you care to start?
Yes, sir. I did interviews with Mr. Colton Wood. I move for approval. Sarah Redding. I move for approval. Let's see who else. Denise Smallwood, approval. Mr. Zachary Petty, approval. Matt Coates, approval. And Bo Dooling at the bottom, we will defer until the next meeting.
Okay. Now, a couple of these are subject to them passing the exam, am I correct?
That is correct. On the graphs, you will note where they stand. In many of these cases, our commission members have been wonderful and able to do the review of the reports and even the interview away from the meeting date. And so today, we need to go on the record and make sure that every name is read on the record if it's approved or deferred as you have it. But if they're pending the exam, then at least we're not holding them up for a meeting or for an interview. That means that's the last piece that the board office would be waiting for, and then we can license them and get them done.
What would be the pleasure of the commission as far as voting on these? You want to vote on these by the member or all at once? All at once. All right, we're going to vote on these all at once. Mr. Garrison, you're next.
Okay, one of them is a trainee of one of our commission members, so I don't know how we want to handle that, if he didn't vote or recuse himself. Do we want to run that one separate?
Let's run it separate, and
Okay.
I would prefer if we recuse, that way the rest of the
Right.
members can.
Very good.
hear. Yes.
The other ones, I have Brittany Campbell, Daniel Farrow, Tomasi Casagrande. Another one I'm going to keep separate. I'll keep another one separate, and I was looking on our list here. Mark Johnstone did the interview, or did the review. I did the interview. Trent, I don't see him on here on our list. His last name.
You don't know his last name right now? Mr. Barr? B-A-H-R?
Yep.
Okay,
I'll include him. And
Okay.
then I've got two that I'll run separate.
perfect.
That's it. I approve those.
Anyone else? I had Mr. Patrick Gallagher, which I say yes, approve. Raven Branson, approve, subject to her passing the exam. And Anna Stone, which I approve, vote approve. All right, on the ones that you've heard so far, do I hear a motion to accept approval?
I move we accept.
Second.
Motion's been made and second. Any further discussion? Ready to vote? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, we want to go back to, let's go back to Mr. Garrison. And take up the special ones?
Brian Kanelke, I think I pronounced that right.
Yes.
I approve his experience.
Roxanne, I'm going to recuse from this one.
Thank you.
We're going to vote on this one by itself. Mr. Garrison's made the motion to approve. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Ready to vote? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? One abstention. Okay, continue, Mr. Garrison.
Okay, Chris Chatham, I just received his reports yesterday morning, but, well, he gave them to me in the interview. I haven't not had a chance to review them, so I make this motion. Let me, we approve him conditionally upon my review, and if there's any issues, we'll take it up in January, but other than that, if he, if it's fine, that way he can take the exam.
Were you able to do the interview?
Did the
Okay,
interview.
so the interview was okay.
Interview was fine. I
That's
just
what I
need to review the reports, and I'll do those later.
And if you'll
this week.
confirm via email, then we'll have all
Yes,
those pieces.
very
We're
good.
comfortable with that.
All right, Mr. Garrison's made the motion to accept Charles Chatham, subject to him reviewing the work. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion been made and second. Any further discussion? Ready to vote? All those in favor say yes.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. I believe that completes interviews.
Yes, let me make sure that I've got all my, John Casagrande, have we read him? And this would be Mr. Garrison.
Yeah.
You read him on the record?
Tomasi was his first name, so.
What was?
Tomasi?
That's why I have Ms.
Okay.
John. Thank you. It was approved, Mr. Barr.
They're kind of spelled the same, John Tomasi,
And you completed the one for Mr. Daniel Farrow?
Yes.
He's approved?
It was one that I mentioned, yes.
Okay. Just want to make sure I've got everybody. Atwood, Mr. Coates? Matt Coates?
Matt Coach, yes, he was on, yes,
Earlier.
approved.
Okay, we've got everybody. I want to make sure we had a larger group than usual, and I think that's going to be the case moving forward. I just want to make sure that we can continue this process. Really appreciate the commission members being able to meet outside of the meeting time, getting these moved quickly, and we will try to get those reports to you all electronically to keep going. So that is the only piece that I had for meeting business. We will go ahead and start the rulemaking hearing piece, so I'm going to turn it over to our new attorney, Ms. Anna Matlock, and she'll guide us through the process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Comicio. This rulemaking hearing is called to order. My name is Anna Matlock. I serve as an Assistant General Counsel in the Department of Commerce and Insurance, Division of Regulatory Boards, and I represent the Tennessee Real Estate Appraisers Commission. Would the agency representatives who are present introduce themselves for the record?
My name's Roxanne Agamusia, and I'm the Executive Director for the Tennessee Real Estate Appraiser Commission.
Brett Mansfield.
Rex Garrison.
Randall Thomas.
James Atwood.
Jason Bennett.
Fred McCara.
Shell Alexander.
Today is Tuesday, October 16th, 2018. This rulemaking hearing is taking place pursuant to Tennessee Code Annotated Section 4-5-204 and Room 1B of the Davy Crockett Tower, 500 James Robertson Parkway, Nashville, Tennessee. The purpose of this rulemaking hearing is to solicit comments on proposed rules the Commission has made public. The referenced rules would allow applicants to complete up to one-half of their pre-licensure qualifying education hours via internet or distance education. In order to do this, the rules remove the word classroom from the current rules. Currently, licensed and certified appraisers are allowed to take one-half of their continued education online because the current rule does not use the word classroom. The new rules would add language to the rule in order to clarify the licensed and certified appraisers may complete one-half of their continued education online by distance education. Also, registered trainees would be allowed to complete up to one-half of their continued education online or by distance education. Finally, the rules reduce the supervisory appraiser course required prior to the supervising a trainee appraiser from 7 hours to 4 hours. A rule is defined as an agency statement of general applicability that implements or prescribes law or policy or describes the procedures or practice requirements of the agency. Proposed rules are filed with the Office of the Secretary of State. Notice is given to the public for comment and a rulemaking hearing is held. Upon conclusion of the hearing and adoption of the proposed rules, the rules are forwarded to the Attorney General's office for review of legality. If approved, they are filed with the Secretary of State, which is responsible for publication in the Government Operations Committee of the General Assembly. The rules must stay in the Secretary of State's office for 90 days, the end of which time will be the effective date. Those members of the public wishing to speak should sign up at the podium at the front of the room. Only those who have signed up will be presented to speak. Oral comments will not be accepted from persons who have not signed the sign-in sheet. Is there anyone else present that desires to offer oral comment but who has not signed the sign-in sheet? Seeing that there are none, I would call your attention to the sign-in sheet at the podium. On the table behind me, to the right, there are red-line copies of this rule on the table. The notice of rulemaking hearing included the entire text of the proposed rules and was published on the Tennessee Administrative Register website on August 22, 2018. Ms. Gamusio, what additional notice was given to the affected individuals or groups?
The email notification was sent out on August the 1st of 2018 to anyone signed up for email notification, and our website was posted with the agenda showing today's meeting, and that was posted on October the 11th.
At this time, I will read the substance of the proposed rules into the record, followed by the Regulatory Flexibility Addendum, otherwise known as Economic Impact Statement and the Impact on Local Government Statement. Following such, there will be a time for the public to comment. As the agency hears public comment on the proposed rules, I, as moderator, reserve the right to limit such comments if they become repetitive. Please limit your comments accordingly. I will read the substance of the proposed rules into the record. Rule 1255-01-.051B is amended by deleting the word classroom wherever it appears in Part B1 and inserting the phrase no more than 50% via internet or distance education immediately following the phrase hours of courses, so that as amended, Part B1 shall read, B. Appraisal education. An applicant shall satisfy the following appraisal education requirements as a prerequisite to sit for the state licensed appraiser examination. 1. 150 hours of courses, no more than 50%, via internet or distance education and subjects related to real estate appraisal, which shall include Rule 1255-05-.071B is amended by deleting the word classroom wherever it appears in Part B1 and inserting the phrase no more than 50% via internet or distance education immediately following the phrase hours of courses, so that amended Part B1 shall read, B. Appraisal education. An applicant shall satisfy the following appraisal education requirements as a prerequisite to sit for the state certified residential appraiser examination. 1. 200 hours of courses, no more than 50% via internet or distance education, and subjects related to real estate appraisal, hereinafter qualifying education requirement. These modules shall include Rule 1255-01-.081B is amended by deleting the word classroom wherever it appears in Part B1 and inserting the phrase no more than 50% via internet or distance education immediately following the phrase hours of courses, so that as amended Part B1 shall read, appraisal education. An applicant shall satisfy the following appraisal education requirements as a prerequisite to sit for the state certified general appraisal examination. 1. 300 hours of courses, no more than 50% via internet or distance education and subjects related to real estate appraisal. These modules shall include hereinafter qualifying education requirement. Rule 1255 1B is amended by deleting the word classroom wherever it appears in Part B3, so that as amended, Part B3 shall read, 3. An applicant's qualifying education requirement may include the 150-hour requirement for the licensed real estate appraiser classification or the 200-hour requirement for the certified residential real estate appraisal certification. Rule 1255-05-.123 is amended by inserting the language no more than 50% via internet or distance education, immediately following the phrase hours of courses, so that as amended, paragraph 3 shall read, 3. Education. Before registration, an applicant for trainee registration shall complete 75 hours of courses, no more than 50% via internet or distance education, and subjects related to real estate appraisal, which shall include but shall not be limited to coverage of the uniform standards of professional appraisal practice, hereinafter course credit. An applicant shall complete the required course credit as a prerequisite to applying for registration as a registered trainee. All applicants shall submit evidence of completion of a minimum of an approved 30-hour course in appraisal principles, an approved 30-hour course in practices and procedures, and the 15-hour National Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice course. An applicant shall also ensure that his or her course credit complies with the following. Rule 1255-01-.127 is amended by deleting the word classroom wherever it appears in subparagraph 7A and by deleting the word classroom wherever it appears in subparagraph 7C and substituting instead the word course, so that as amended, paragraph 7 shall read, 7. Continuing education. A registered trainee who remains in the classification of registered trainee in excess of 2 years shall be required to obtain a minimum of 28 hours of instruction in courses, seminars, workshops, or conferences approved by the Commission prior to the next renewal period, hereinafter continuing education. B. As part of a registered trainee's continuing education, a registered trainee shall complete the 7-hour National Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice course at least once every 2 years as defined and required by Rule 1255-04-.012. C. A course hour is defined as 50 minutes of actual instruction for each 60-minute segment. Rule 1255-01-.127 is amended by adding a new subparagraph H, which shall read, H. A registered trainee may complete no more than one half of the individual's required continuing education credits via internet or distance education. Rule 1255-01-.1210G is amended by replacing 7 and instead substituting 4. G. On or about January 1st, 2019, supervisory appraisers shall be required to complete a 4-hour course that at minimum complies with the specifications for course content established by the AQB, which is specifically oriented to the requirements and responsibilities of supervisory appraisers and trainee appraisers. The course is to be completed by the supervisory appraiser prior to supervising a trainee appraiser. Rule 1255-04-.01 is amended by deleting the word instruction and substituting instead the word courses wherever it appears in paragraph 1, so that as amended, paragraph 1 shall read, 1. As a prerequisite to renewal of a real estate appraiser license or certificate, the licensee or certificate holder shall complete at least 28 hours of continuing education courses approved by the Commission during each renewal period, which is every 2 years, hereinafter continuing education. Rule 1255-04-.01 is amended by adding a new paragraph 8, which shall read, a licensee or certificate holder may complete no more than 1/2 of the individual's required continuing education credits via internet or distance education. That would conclude my reading of the amendments and changes of the rules. Next, I will be moving to the regulatory flexibility addendum. Pursuant to TCA sections 5-4-401 through 4-5-404, prior to initiating the rulemaking process, all agencies shall conduct a review of whether a proposed rule or rule affects small business. 1. The type or types of small business and an identification and estimate of the number of small businesses subject to the proposed rule that would bear the cost of or directly benefit from the proposed rule. Response. The proposed rule would benefit small businesses in the real estate appraiser industry by allowing applicants the ability to take up to 1/2 of their required pre-licensure qualifying education online or by distance education. Under the current continuing education rule for licensed and certified appraisers, the Commission has allowed those licensees to complete up to 1/2 of their required continuing education online. This proposed rule would add language to that rule. Additionally, the proposed rule would allow registered trainees the ability to take up to 1/2 of their required 28 hours of continuing education online or by distance education. Currently, the rules require a supervisory appraiser to take a 7-hour course prior to supervising a trainee appraiser. The Commission felt that this requirement is cumbersome and has therefore proposed to reduce the requirement to a 4-hour course, which is more readily available. The exact number of small businesses that this proposed rule will affect cannot be determined because the Tennessee Real Estate Appraiser Commission does not register those businesses, but rather only licensees that the individuals that work for those businesses. However, there are currently 1,828 appraisers licensed with the Commission and 155 appraisal management companies, most of which are believed to be small businesses. 2. The projected reporting, record keeping, and other administrative costs required for compliance with the proposed rule, including the type of professional skills necessary for preparation of the report or record. Response. The proposed rule will require minimal, if any, costs for compliance. 3. A statement of the probable cause effect on impacted small businesses and consumers. Response. The proposed rules would affect small businesses in the real estate appraisal industry, but in a beneficial way. The proposed rules would allow both applicants to take a portion of their pre-licensure qualifying education online or distance education, which in turn will reduce the cost of taking these courses with the removal of travel costs and other costs associated with taking a class in person versus online. 4. A description of any less burdensome, less intrusive, or less costly alternative methods of achieving the purpose and objectives of the proposed rule that may exist, and to what extent the alternative means might be less burdensome to small businesses. Response. The Commission knows of no other alternative method to achieve the rules exhibited by this rule. 5. A comparison of the proposed rule with any federal or state counterparts. Response. The Commission is aware of several states, including, but not limited to, Kentucky, West Virginia, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, South Carolina, and North Carolina that allow applicants and licensees to take at least a portion of their education courses online for both qualifying education and continuing education. 6. Analysis of the effect of the possible exemption of small businesses from all or any part of the requirements contained in the proposed rules. Response. An exception for small businesses would not be beneficial. Next, I will move on to the impact on local government statement. Pursuant to TCA sections 4-5-220 and 4-5-228, any rule proposed to be promulgated shall state in the simple declarative sentence without additional comments on the merits of the policy of the rules or regulation, whether the rule or regulation may have a projected impact on local governments. Response. The Tennessee Real Estate Appraiser Commission foresees no impact on any local governments. Next, we will move to the comments portion of this hearing. Ms. Gamusio, were there any written comments received by the Commission office regarding these rules?
Yes, the office received 3 written comments. I have 2 in my hand. One of them was able to actually come in person, so he will be either reading his or...
Ms. Gamusio, will you please proceed by reading the first comment and the name of the individual?
Yes. Thank you. The first one received yesterday comes from Mr. Chris Benton. My name is Chris Benton. I'm writing you today in support of the proposed rule change that would allow trainees to take a portion of their qualifying education online. I received my trainee's license in July of 2016. I am currently pursuing my general appraiser's license. This process has been one of the most challenging ones I've encountered in my professional life thus far. While I do believe this highly regarded profession should be difficult to enter, I think for some it is nearly impossible. I would surmise that most people seeking to become appraisers did not have a connection to the profession right out of college, but rather maybe starting down a second or third career path. Because of this, they might find themselves in a stage of life not unlike my own, with a full-time job and a spouse and a family to provide for while pursuing this license. The main issues lies in finding a way to take time off work for a 4-day class 11 times over the course of one's training period. Based on my conversations with other trainees, most are not compensated during this time, and typically the cost of the class and all expenses involved are up to the trainee to cover. Not to mention that most employers view this as time off and therefore count these as vacation days, leaving the trainee with very few to no days left for time off with family throughout the year. As a general appraisal trainee, the Appraisal Institute is the only organization that offers the specific courses required for me to gain certification in the state of Tennessee. While I am fortunate that the Appraisal Institute offers all of its classes in the state at some point during the year, each class is only offered 1 time per year. So if one's schedule does not allow taking the class at a particular time it's being offered, the options are to wait until the following year to take the class or look to see if it's offered in another state. For example, I'm heading to Oklahoma City to take my last course in January, or otherwise would have to wait another several months for the course to be offered locally. All this to say, I think a practical and progressive solution to the issue I laid out above would be to allow trainees to pursue at least a portion of their qualifying courses online. I do not believe online courses would affect the quality of one's education in this field, as proctored tests would still be required to assess one's mastery of the course content. I know this rule change would not benefit me as I am finishing my certification in the near future, but I believe this would help provide a much more accessible path to certification for those pursuing this career in the future. Thank you for your time and consideration of this matter. Sincerely, and it is signed, Chris Benton, and he was unable, unfortunately, to come today. The second... No, go ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Gamusio. I will now give the Commission an opportunity to respond to this comment directly on the record. Seeing that there are none, Ms. Gamusio, will we proceed with the second comment?
Thank you. And this email was received at the crack of dawn this morning. This is from Stephen W. Forrester. Mr. Forrester reads via email, Roxana, I am an advocate of professional education within the classroom setting and in person. I believe that such offers more beneficial and accountable learning environment to all. Also, the classroom environment offers a collegial input from all attending, as well as information offered by an instructor through lectures, case studies, etc. This classroom environment is conducive to professional learning communities built among peers and practitioners. I would ask that you consider online professional education as an inferior product to that of personal education on site. If left to the online environment, true learning and professional development would be inferior, as most professionals across a wide spectrum of disciplines may not seek answers to questions that may arise in an online-only environment. Thanks for your consideration, and this again comes from Stephen W. Forster.
Thank you, Ms. Camusio. At this time, I will give the Commission an opportunity to respond to those comments directly on the record. Seeing that there are none, Ms. Camusio, do you have a third comment?
I do not. They have signed in, so they'll be speaking for themselves.
Thank you. At this time, I will be retrieving the comment sheet and begin taking comments from those signed up on the sheet today. Mr. Dan Bradley.
Make sure that the light goes red. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and address you today. My name is Dan Bradley. I'm a certified general appraiser, and I'm the director of online appraisal curriculum for McKissick Education. We support the board's proposal that would allow up to 50% of qualifying education to be taken via distance education. Currently, Tennessee is one of only 5 states that doesn't allow any qualifying education via distance education. If you're interested in trivia, the other 4 are Alaska, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Nebraska. Montana and New York just changed their regulations to allow qualifying education to be taken via distance education. And North Carolina is currently considering a reg change that would allow all qualifying education to be taken via distance education, as opposed to just some. I know the last time a similar proposal was made here in Tennessee was about 3.5 years ago, and the discussion sort of devolved into a debate about what's better, online education versus distance education, and we've already heard one comment letter to that regard as well. This point is essentially moot, okay? It's not about what's better, and we could debate what's better, what's not. Online education, distance education, is accepted in the professional education world. It's accepted in the academic world in general. One can earn a college degree from a highly regarded university without ever setting foot in a classroom. It doesn't cheapen the degree, and it doesn't mean a death knell for traditional classroom education. Distance education is neither better nor worse than traditional classroom education. It's just different. It's the same material presented in a different delivery method. It's an alternative, and some students prefer it, online or distance education, and some prefer traditional classroom, and there's nothing inherently wrong with either. In states that allow distance education, it has not replaced traditional classroom education. I was on the Pennsylvania Appraisal Board in 2005 when we voted to allow distance education. And just for the record, I was not an employee of McKissick at the time. But we voted, and it's been 12, 14 years now, and online education is here, and it coexists with traditional classroom education. You can take classroom education or distance education as you see fit, and it allows students the ability to choose the type of course presentation that best fits them and their learning style. I'm also affiliated with an appraisal firm in Western Pennsylvania, and right now we have 2 trainees. Both of them are new college graduates, 20-somethings with bachelor's degrees. One of them prefers traditional classroom education. And like the one comment letter stated, She wants to take the classes when she can take them in the order she wants to take them. She's had to travel quite a bit. She's been able to pick up a few classes in the Pittsburgh area, but she's had to go to Indiana. She's had to go to Oklahoma to take classes. She's gone for a week at a time. It's expensive to fly to Oklahoma, stay in a hotel for a week. Now, it's worked for her, and she prefers it. Okay, nothing wrong with that. But not everybody has the ability to take off and go for a week, or the wherewithal, the financial wherewithal to pay for a week's worth of classes in hotels. Our other trainee prefers online courses, and he's taken a lot of his coursework online. He takes the courses he wants to take when he wants to take them, and he's saved a lot of money. He's pretty frugal, and he saved a lot of money by not having to travel and take the classes. Now, is one of our trainees smarter than the other, better prepared than the other? No. Okay. Is one of them more likely to pass the exam than the other one? No. Okay. The good thing is they can both take the courses in the manner that they prefer, and I have total confidence that both of these trainees are going to pass their certification exam and become certified appraisers and a credit to the profession. I don't see any way of saying, well, because the one trainee's had online education, he's less likely to pass the exam. Frankly, a better barometer of success when you're going to talk about who's going to pass the exam is the quality of the training, the quality of the supervisor who's with you every day, who's going in and out of houses with you or properties. So, in closing, I would hope, and we would hope, that this proposal will be adopted and the appraiser applicants in Tennessee will be able to do what applicants in 45 other states can do, which is to choose the type of qualifying education that best fits their learning style and their schedule. And thank you for your attention. And if anybody has any questions, I'll stand here and listen.
Thank you, Mr. Bradley. At this time, I will note for the record, Mr. Bradley did not propose any changes, but will give the commission an opportunity to respond to those comments directly on the record.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Bradley?
Thank you, Mr. Bradley. Would you restate, reclarify, reword one of your sentences earlier? And I don't have it a quote. But your point was that the quality of the education is a moot point. Would you rephrase that or restate that? Because I do not think it's a moot point.
I would respectfully disagree. It's been found in many studies throughout the academic world that students who take online education versus students who take traditional classroom education, there's no difference in the outcome. They learn the same material. They are just as likely to be successful in their career or in their pursuit of an academic degree, as opposed to, it's not like, I think what happens in distance education is a lot of individuals have kind of a bad taste in their mouth for it because they look back at what distance education used to be years ago, where you take a correspondence course that you learned about on the back of a matchbook, okay? And it's not that way anymore. These courses are highly regulated. There are standards and requirements, and I'll give you an example. In addition to the proctored exam at the end of one of these qualifying education courses, in addition to that, you also have assessments that have to be completed along the way. The International Distance Education Certification Center, IDEC, has requirements for 10 assessment items per hour of classroom. So you're talking about, in a 30-hour course, you're talking about 300 individual questions that have to be mastered before one can move on to even sit for the proctored exam at the end. So it's not like somebody can take a course like that and just click, click, click through the pages and not actually pay attention or follow along, because if they don't master the material, they will never get to the end where they can take the proctored exam.
else? Sure.
Thank you for coming today. We appreciate you traveling here and your opinion. So, a couple questions. So, McKissick, no in-course appraisal-related classes, correct? It's all online for appraisal.
For
Continuing, or
qualifying,
for
yeah,
qualifying.
For qualifying education, you're correct.
Okay,
For
but
continuing
you also
education, we offer classroom. And,
Right.
Yeah.
And so, on the real estate side, not on to obtain your affiliate broker license, you do offer in-class room education for that, or is it all online?
It depends on the state.
Okay. Basically, what I'm getting at is, do you have any statistical data that kind of points to the online education pass-fail rate compared to, and it doesn't have to be in the appraisal sector, but what that correlation is?
I know we don't have it on the appraisal side,
Right.
largely because that data is really hard to come by in the appraisal space, because a lot of people take classes and then they never wind up taking the exam. Plus, I've often thought that the success on the exam is largely, on the appraisal side, is more related to the quality of the person's training and supervision as opposed to what they learned in the classroom. I know on the real estate side, it varies by state because the different states, there's no national exam like there is in appraisal. Every state administers their own exam, but anecdotal information indicates that there's no difference between the pass rates for online students versus classroom students.
Same class.
But again, that might vary by state.
Okay. Mr. Bradley, can you discuss a little bit, one of the comments from earlier was the interaction when you're in an actual classroom setting with other people in the classroom. What interaction ability does your software package have when someone is taking an online class where students have the ability to communicate or communicate with the instructor?
They have the ability to communicate. There's a chat feature where they can communicate with each other. There is also a button that you can click to answer or ask questions of the instructor. We also have recently started what we call virtual office hours. So if you're an online student and you're taking a class and you have, just like at a university, from 5 to 7 p.m. on Wednesday or 2 to 4 p.m. on the and directly speak with the instructor online using a chat, like a Skype type program.
Like a question, how many of your instructors are actually practicing appraisers?
For appraisal, everyone. Everyone, yeah. And not only are they practicing appraisers, they're also all certified USPAP instructors.
Mr. Bradley, I appreciate you coming in. You said that you didn't offer any qualifying ed in Tennessee, classroom-wise.
Correct.
Why is that? Do you offer it anyplace else?
We have in the past, and it's just by the time it's just not economically viable for the way we do things. We've offered classes with sometimes 5 people in them. Send an instructor to Tennessee or to, we've done classes in places like Northern Virginia. I've taught a lot of those classes myself. And you go in there and, with all room, whatever, and you've got 5 or 6 people in the classroom. And, I know a lot of educators will sometimes cancel those classes. We don't want to do that. So we'll hold it even though we're going to lose money on it. And you can't do that.
So are you offering real estate classes in Tennessee for real estate license?
I do not believe so, no.
Okay. I guess one question I have, if you're looking at education, you're straight online then, is that right? what percentage of your courses are online versus in the classroom nationally?
It's a difficult question to answer because
For appraisers.
well, for appraisers, we offer a lot of continuing education in the classroom in probably 20 states, 15 or 20 states.
Do you offer any continuing ed in Tennessee in the classroom?
I'm in charge of that schedule. I'm going to say we have in the past. We probably haven't done any recently, no.
And I guess my point, if it's about education, and if it's about hitting both sides, both in classroom and in online, then why aren't you offering both? Is it all about economics, or is it all, are you more focused on teaching?
On the qualifying side, we can reach more people online. State, we will have, you have a pretty good idea of the appraiser population, and you can, not to give trade secrets here, but you can kind of target your classes to where the appraisers are. On the qualifying ed side of things, you don't really know in many cases where the trainees are. Because they're not on a national registry, and that information isn't readily available. So a lot of times you're guessing in the dark. I think we'll go into such and such a city and offer a class, and you get 4 people that sign up for it. And with qualifying education particularly, you take those classes, you take them once, and if you go in, say you're going to teach residential market analysis and highest and best use, and that course was already offered by another provider 3 months ago, you're not going to get very many people that are going to take it from you. So it more people with the online offering, and they can take it when they want to take it, not when it's convenient for you as the provider, when it's convenient for them as the student.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Mr. Bradley, you mentioned your students have the opportunity through chats or and asking questions of instructors. Is there a mandatory requirement for interaction, or could your online students just strictly take the class without interacting with their peers taking the class online?
There's mandatory interaction with the instructor. The peer interaction, frankly, that's not that dissimilar than a classroom where, I've taught enough classroom courses to know that there are people who sit back in the corner and don't say a word to anybody. And that's the way they prefer it. You have on that interaction, you have the people that really, frankly, don't. Force them to interact if they don't want to, but we do have instructor-student interaction, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Bradley. You may be seated. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bradley. Next is Mr. Creighton Cross.
Creighton Cross, Knoxville, Tennessee, Certified General Appraiser. Just want to thank you all for letting me speak today and for everyone being present. I am currently, as the rules proposed, against. Personally, I've had 11 trainees over the last 7-8 years. Personal experience in having trainees and being a supervisor or appraiser of those trainees is that the experience that my trainees have gotten through course or classroom education has been critical in their education endeavors. The peer interaction, things that have been so, I guess, rewarding to those trainees has been keeping those relationships and those experiences that are discussed outside of just the actual instruction in the classroom. I have one situation where I've had a trainee appraiser who had received online education outside of the state of Tennessee, was able to receive a certification in another state with online education, who unfortunately was not able to perform at the level that she needed to in the state of Tennessee and was not able to continue the profession as she continued. I was not privy to all the information, all the details of the online education that she had or who those providers were. I just know that throughout the course of her interactions and employment with my firm, she repeatedly said that she would wish she had taken those courses in the classroom. I have taken online continuing education. In the state of Tennessee, we're allowed to have a certain amount of hours of online continuing education. I think most of the people in the room have taken level. I've also taken online education in other forms, such as the CCIM designation for. I have found that that is not a satisfactory or equally competent format for me to learn in that setting. And I know that everyone has their own individual preferences as to their education platform. However, I've found that the personal experience that I've had in classroom education has far more outweighed what I've experienced in that online setting. Biggest things that I've taken away from that as an appraiser was taking courses through my qualifying education in Georgia, Florida, Texas, Illinois, Virginia, Tennessee, Kentucky, and North Carolina. I was able to travel to those destinations while costly, sometimes inefficient. It was able to make me have relationships with appraisers, peers, instructors from all around the country and the world that I have not had the same interaction with through continuing education or other licenses. I do believe that the way that this rule is written is not in the best interest of the public trust. I believe that this commission goal is to protect the public trust. I believe that the quality of the education in classroom holds a standard that is above and beyond that the online education currently does in most settings. There are certainly some platforms that are better than others. There are certainly some methods of learning that are better for some than others. But I do personally believe, and in my experience with my trainees and my future trainees, that online education, I have in the past paid for education for my trainees. I understand, as one of the letters was written, that is an inconvenience, that a lot of supervisors are not doing that. But I've also assisted those trainees over the years in paying for their salary or supplementing their income in some fashion. It's a business practice that I understand, but also am firmly embedded in the fact that in-classroom experience and the level of that education is superior to that of what is available currently online. I would like to ask that there would be some survey research. I would like to know the statistics that were questioned with Mr. Bradley, other online provider of education. I would like to know if there's some type of statistical difference between online education and in-classroom education. Questions that I have pertaining to some of the online platforms is how is it monitored? I know in online education that I have taken, I can step away from the computer, even in synchronous environments. I can step away from the computer to, fix dinner for the kids, and I come back to that, education platform. What is the rule that would hold people accountable? If I'm in that classroom and I don't sign in, sign out at some level, and that instructor or those other peers in that classroom can see me, see the whites of my eyes, and know that I'm in that classroom being held accountable, that would be a question that I would like to ask and find out, is how is that regulated at some level? The synchronous courses that I have attended through CCIM Institute has been, there's some type of monitoring. There may be a video monitoring where it's interactive that way, or it is mandatory interaction with peers. Personally, was not as good of an education experience as I've had in classroom, but to each their own as far as their. That is my take. I know that I plan on continuing to take trainees in the state of Tennessee. I do believe in education. I have enough education, and the quality of that education oftentimes is a reflection on our profession and the quality of those appraisers. And so I would ask that this be voted against in the way that it's written. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. I will now give the commission an opportunity to respond to those comments directly on the record.
How recently was it that you took an online course?
As an appraiser? As an appraiser, I think the last course I took as an appraiser online was an FHA appraisal course. It was a, honestly, qualifications, but it was an FHA update or FHA review course.
When was it?
It was probably the end of last year. I had my continuing education for the year. It was just an education course I wanted to take, and there was.
Was that course offered in the classroom setting?
It was not offered at the time. It was something where I had applied to be on the FHA roster, and I was in the process of doing my due diligence. I was competent with my FHA appraisals.
I also have a question for you. In your appraisal education, irregardless of CCIM, the courses that you've taken live, are they offered by a multitude of suppliers or just one?
When you said live, were they
Yes, sir.
offered by multiple? To my knowledge, most of the appraiser training was offered live
No,
via
that's not what I
multiple venues.
Okay, multiple
Providers.
Providers, yeah.
Providers, yes.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
You mentioned you took some classes online. How many do you remember taking online?
3 currently that I'm thinking about. I'm sure there's a few more. A lot of my just webinars, seminars over the years. I know there's over 600 hours of education that I've had in the last 10 years. So there's been several webinars or seminar education that I've taken online.
Most recent one, you said you took last year, and the others were previously. Did you notice any difference between the quality of the online opportunities in the class you took last year compared to the ones you took previously?
I would say yes, only in the interaction. The material is the material.
Oh, when you say the interaction, do you mean there was more opportunity for interaction in the one you took most recently?
No. I have taken, again, I'm trying to just stick to appraisal education. There's different formats and different licenses that I've pursued, but I would say that it has improved as far as the interaction, the ability to perhaps ask questions, and that's more of a software or platform, I guess, application. I know in years past it was not easily, it was you might have had the course material in front of you in some type of format where you're reading it or it's being read to you. I can email someone, maybe a professor or an instructor or something, while I'm going through it on my own time, versus one of the courses I took, it was much more interactive and more present, I guess, I got a quicker response.
Did you have the opportunity to communicate with other students in the class and the one that you took most recently by virtue of things called chat rooms?
I did not take advantage of the chat room if it was available, so I don't know.
Do you know if it was available?
I do not remember if it was available. I do believe there was a roster, and that roster had perhaps emails, names of other students that I did not take advantage of. I do not remember if there was a chat room format.
I have an additional question for you. Have you ever taken the additional qualifying education classes a second time?
Additional qualifying education a second time.
Principles, procedures, have you taken them additionally in your career?
I have not taken the qualifying education a second time in my career, but it is something with the addition of some new courses. I was a little bit grandfathered on that. I plan on taking a few of those courses as time allows, and it will be in person.
One of the comments that we hear is that people, you want to go to the class so you can interact with your peers, and And I think a lot of what we're discussing here is qualifying education, and when someone's taking qualifying education, they don't know what they're doing. There are typically no other appraisers in that class. If there is an appraiser in that class, I would say 90% of the time they're in there because a state has required them to take that class again. And I don't necessarily think you want your trainee interacting with that person who's required to be in that class.
I may have misspoke now that you put it that way. I want to say it was yield capitalization a second time when I had trainees that were sitting for their state licensing. They had already proceeded through the advanced curriculum. I was studying for the MAI comprehensive exam. I sat through one of the advanced courses a second time. So I spoken, you enlightened me on that. So I have taken it in that regard.
Okay.
You mentioned you had an associate who did not have a good experience with an online course. Have you had associates who said that they had online classes and they found them very beneficial?
I have not allowed trainees in my firm to take online education. That was a situation where the appraiser had been certified in another state, came through reciprocity through another state, Florida to Indiana to Tennessee. She had taken a few courses in classroom, and just the comments were consistent that the classroom education, she had wished that she had taken all of her qualifying education.
Okay, what about continuing education? Have you had associates who have taken courses in continuing education online?
Yes, sir.
Were they satisfied with them?
For the most part, yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Cross, the online course that you took, did you have any unanswered questions? Did you leave thinking there was something missing? Did you leave thinking that you did not get your money's worth? Can you speak to that?
The course was actually, it was a good course. That course was offered through McKissick. I did have questions, and those questions were answered via instructors or peers. I was able to reach out to other peers that had far greater experience in the FHA realm than I have, and I was able to get a lot of those questions answered through my peers.
Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Cross. You may be seated.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. Next, we have Mr. Michael Williamson. Okay. Just noting for the record, Mr. Williamson no longer wishes to comment. Mr. Billy Medley, are you still present and wish to comment on the proposed rules today?
Just a few comments if I could.
Okay.
Certified General Real Estate Appraiser, SRWA with the International Right-of-Way. Chapter 32 here locally. Just a couple of real quick things I want to say. In my experience, if you're not associated with a professional group, then you almost are hooked into having to go take these outside online courses. Because if you're not associated with this, like IRWA and AFA or whatever, most of my courses have been taken through my group. And we get them approved through the Real Estate Appraisal Commission in front of that. My experience in taking those courses and being a coordinator for them and setting up the courses for the people that we talk to, the RWA is working towards online education for all of our courses eventually. And I'll just let you know, all eyes are on Tennessee right now, just so you'll know. The International Right-of-Way Association is going to get a report from this meeting about this. What I'm going to say is that one thing I have learned through these instructors I've done, they got great war stories. They have great war stories. You cannot get that online. You're sitting there and it's just like you said, same material. But you don't get the story that kind of ties in what the theme of that what he's talking about to your actual experience that you're going to have when you leave out of there. Interaction with the instructors and the students is invaluable. You cannot replace it. I think that the online, if done correctly, could be something that we can work towards in the future. I don't believe that Tennessee's ready for it right now. I really do not think so. I think that my professional designation, I can go and get the education through the different classes I've taken. I can go to a conference where I attend 3 or 4 days and get the hours for that and stuff like that. But all of this stuff has to do with being there, being able to do it. I myself, I'm kind of like Creighton. I don't do very well online. I've taken one course, the USPAP course, several years ago. It didn't have any interaction. It was just a matter of me sitting there. And then on top of that, I want to say this. I was able to hit the go back button when I didn't do well. And when I did, then I'd go on and figure it out, and then I'd move my way forward till I finally passed the darn thing. So what I was going to say, and just a real quick comment is that take the person out of the class and put him in front of a screen, whether it's through the VEET program, you're going to find out that they're going to walk away with less versus more. And that's essentially all I've got to say.
Thank you, Mr. Metley. At this time, I will give the Commission an opportunity to respond to those comments directly on the record.
Do you have any comments? I do. When we started, Ms. Matlock stated that just about every state around us allows a portion to be online. And you said Tennessee is not ready. Tell me why. What are we doing wrong that we're not ready?
If we go with the online right now and we don't really have the security issues settled, I think that maybe we can learn from those other people, versus just, hey, let's just blanket this thing. Online's good, ready to go. I'm not against McKissick. I think that they do probably a pretty good job at what they do. Trees does the same thing. What I'm saying is that I really feel in my mind that we're not ready right now to release this out as a blanket statement, say, all online. I think the Commission needs to look at it. We have a survey, like he mentioned, of people that says, hey, this is what we're going to do, and then have the security issues that make sure that I would hate to say that there are people out there, they're a supervisor, let's just say. He absolutely needs his trainee. He's going to sit right beside him. Answers B, answers C, answers D. Hey, God. I'm afraid that security issue needs to be solved versus just a blanket, let's go with all online. That's all I'm saying.
Two statements. You do realize we're not saying 100% online.
I do understand that.
Okay. And just because I'm ignorant, I guess, what do you think, or how has the other states been able to handle this security thing?
I think that that's what we need to know.
So
do you know that, sir?
No.
Okay,
no,
so you don't know it.
No, that's why I'm asking.
So it would be hard for you to vote on it if you don't know it. So if they've done it and it's been successful, and they've got all these security issues figured out, they've got this, I will ask the Commission one thing. Of your complaints that you have to deal with on a regular basis, how many of those complaints had to do with somebody that just took all online?
I think we can say 0 because we don't allow it in the state.
Okay, so that tells you right there, one thing is that we don't allow it.
We still have complaints.
We have complaints, but it has to do, I think that we need to find out from those other states, how are the people that are taking online courses like that, how are they doing as far as the complaint issue? I mean, if they're taking, what if you got some states that just do 100%, is that correct? Is that correct? Okay.
There are some.
So I would like to go to those states that have that and see what kind of complaint ratio and what are the complaints. If you just miss that war story, not be able to apply what you learned on paper or on your computer to the real world out there, how is that going to work? And I just think that we just need to step back a step, take our time, and make sure that if we do this with the 50%, which I think it's going to happen, guys, whether it happens today with you, it happens to them, whatever, it's going to happen. But what I want us to be the state that is prepared the best, just like we've been the leader on everything else that we've done. And the commission's been a big part of that.
Mr. Medley, I have another question for you. You said that IRWA, you're the education chair, is that?
Oh, for Chapter 32.
For Chapter 32.
Tennessee.
And do they currently offer any online education?
Yes, they're almost up to 40%, and they're working towards 100. It's just the cost of it, $250,000 a course. It's just a lot.
Right.
And so,
but you don't think that's a good idea?
I do think it's a good idea. I think it's going to go that way. I just think that we need to learn from those professional groups. The AI, how do they do their online? Learn that before we just go make a blanket thing that this is what we're going to do. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you, Mr. Medley.
Thank you, Mr. Medley. Next on the list, we have Mr. Ben Baggett.
Baggett. My name is Ben Baggett. I've been a real estate appraiser approximately 35 years. Mr. Bennett, to answer your question, I have taken the first time, and I took it without being told I had to take it. Time to time, you just have to brush up on the basics. You know, when you're a professional football player, you go through fundamentals every year, and then you move. So, I'm against as written, I'm against the proposal. And basic reason is I think it's coming, just like Mr. Medley said. I think it's coming. Education. I've got a son that got a doctor in nurse practitioning through that. The instructor was in Indiana on some of his courses, but he did the clinicals here. So there's where he got his mentorship and his that's really all I want to say as far as that. I'm a member of RWA. I've been a member of IAAO for several years, etc. So
questions from Mr. Daggett?
I do have one. Do you think your son is any less qualified than someone who took?
no, he had to pass a board examination at the end of it, but he did have to go through, and it was synchronous. He had butt in the seat in front of a computer with a video camera. So there was interaction between the student, the other students in the class, and the instructors. To have a couple of classes that were monitored, but
Else? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Baggett. Next, we have Mr. Mark Evans.
Morning. I'm going to read a letter from the Tennessee Real Estate, from the Tennessee Appraiser Coalition. I'm currently serving as their president. And then I would also like to make some personal comments apart from the coalition. The letter reads, Dear Commissioners, the Tennessee Appraiser Coalition submits this letter with opposition to the proposed education changes for appraiser trainees as it is written. The proposal indicates that trainees may obtain 50% of their required qualifying education through an online platform. It is our opinion that this is an inferior way of gaining the necessary knowledge for this profession, which has been volatile over the last 10 years. The profession can become complicated and tends to be the target of issues with competency by users of appraisals. Online education is still in an infancy phase, particularly for professionals. There are no true standards for the online platform, which can affect the quality of learning that the trainee receives. The online platform does not provide interaction between the student and instructor that is needed when learning the profession. Further, there is no set standard to proctor the exams that are required to pass the course. These are items that we find in the classroom. There are some subjects such as the income approach, market analysis, and highest and best use that can be very difficult to learn and understand. Most of the qualifying education would require an experienced and knowledgeable instructor to instruct these courses. The courses are entitled Qualifying Education, as these are the core fundamental courses that are essential to the profession. We do understand that online education will become the preferred method, particularly for trainees at some point in the future. We do believe that the quality will rise with innovation in platforms that will allow interaction and the proctoring of exams at an affordable rate for professionals. That time is not now. Though there are platforms such as Synchronous, there is limited course availability. Universities utilize a very substantial platform that provides interaction and monitoring, but we have not found that to be the case with online appraisal education providers. The proposed change as written for trainees to obtain 50% of their qualifying education online should be denied. The classroom is a superior way of learning for those who choose to enter the appraiser profession. We acknowledge that this will be something that will be acceptable in the future, but the online education methods from current appraisal education providers are not of a high standard and cannot be properly monitored. We believe that the online education for trainees at this point could raise the risk of an inferior educated appraiser. Sincerely, Mark Evans, 2018 President, Todd Rogers, Vice President, Paul Forns, Treasurer, Ben Baggett, Secretary, Directors David Braun, Creighton Cross, Ben Floyd, Bill Medley, and Bill Wilson. So that is from the Tennessee Appraiser Coalition. I do want to further state that we are for the supervisors having a 4-hour class as opposed to the 7-hour class. We are fine with that. I'm also a certified general appraiser. Have been since 2006. Took everything through the classroom. I'm also currently a master's student at the University of North Alabama, where I'm actually doing everything online there. So I know the types of platforms, so if you have questions about that, that'd be a good thing to ask. But the two platforms are completely different. The university platform is very rigorous. Interaction can be very confusing on there. The learning and what they require of us takes a longer period of time, takes a lot of work. But I also have found I've only taken one online education class for continuing education. That was an environmental course, and it was pretty much read and take an exam and you're done. It was very simple. I think it was a 4-hour class. It might have been a 7. That's been a couple of years since I've done that. But overall, I'm for, at least as trainees, the qualifying education, majority of that should be within the classroom. Even with the certified general, it was very difficult. Some of the classes were difficult, and having that immediate interaction is something that we need. I've also read within some of the online platforms, trying to figure out what's superior and what's inferior. One of the problems that they see arising with online education is the success rate. A lot of, especially the newer generation, they have a lot of hard time with self-motivation because that's what it takes to complete this online education. Whereas in the classroom, you're going on a daily basis and getting it done within a couple of days. So that's all I have.
Any questions?
Yes, sir. Mr. Evans, could you tell the commission exactly what is the purpose of the Tennessee Appraiser Coalition?
Tennessee Appraiser Coalition basically came through and came through as a group in order to kind of help get some legislation passed. We've been instrumental in helping with AMC bill, statute of limitations, and some other legislation. We meet. It's members of anybody can join. That's an appraiser. You can also have affiliate membership, and fees are low. So it's more of just a state rather than your national organizations like AI, ASA. This is just a state.
How many members do you represent?
Don't know the last numbers. Our Vice President Todd Rogers, we just moved to a new online platform with it, a new internet, and that's what keeps all the records for us, and I don't have the numbers.
General, 50, 150?
We'll say a couple of hundred.
And one other question. You indicated you were for the trainee, supervisor trainee course going down to 4 hours. Would you be in favor of that being an online course?
For a supervisor, I don't know what all that course entails. Honestly, I have not had a trainee. Every trainee I've tried to bring on has decided not to do it and has pursued other careers. So I'm not going to speak to that. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question. Did you poll your members for the letter? Was that a poll by your members?
We have a board of directors. Mm-hmm. We have a board of directors, and we have the executive officers, and we met twice actually on this matter. The first time we met in person, face to face, and then we met via conference call last Thursday, I believe, to solidify everything. So the board of directors are the representatives of the membership.
Okay, so that was, but you didn't poll the members to say who was for it, who was against it?
We did not do that, no.
Okay.
Are you equally in opposition to online for 50% of qualifying education and continuing education, or just the qualifying education?
We specifically target for the trainees in particular. We're more for the classroom. If you want to go from TAC point of view, everything just being in the classroom.
Well, the proposal is that 50% of classes could be taken for qualifying education, and also 50% for continuing education. Okay, are you equally opposed to both of those?
We're equally opposed to both, yes.
So you wouldn't even accept that for continuing education, or you would prefer it not? For anyone? Okay, trainees. We already have.
Yes, I'm sorry. We did specify the letter for the qualifying education.
Oh, you don't have a problem with 50%
for the continuing education? Yes.
Okay.
The qualifying education are just the fundamentals that we.
Well, I understand that. I was just trying to figure out your opposition to the proposal. The proposal, the change affects both qualifying education and continuing education.
We're aware of that. That's why we say as it is written. As it is written with the qualifying education being in there, we understand that if that is denied, that the entire thing is denied. We understand that.
Well, if it were changed and it only was for continuing education, would you be in favor of that, or would you not oppose it?
In education only?
For continuing education only?
We would not be opposed to that.
Thank you.
What else? Mr. Mansfield?
So you said continuing education you would be before. What about pre-licensing education before we get obtain the trainee's license?
We had spoke about that, and one of the courses, just to be completely open to, one of the courses was the principals course, the very first one. At first, we were okay with that, but we decided that as the rules were written, that we would have to deny the whole thing. Principles generally, that's your typical definitions and things like that. And that's something that tends to be reiterated throughout the courses as you go on.
What else?
I do have one follow-up question. You said that we're basically talking about a potential trainee being able to take one course is qualifying. So 15 hours. 30 hours, I'm sorry. From that point, the next 1 to 2 years is spent with a sponsor. Do you feel like those 30 hours are so beneficial that they outweigh the next 1 to 2 years that you're going to spend working with someone, that it couldn't be taken in an online setting?
We can say that about any kind of education. We can say that about college education, having a bachelor's degree. The fact is that these classes are the fundamental and core courses that you're going to spend the rest of your career, using. And in my opinion, yes, to me it's essential that all the qualifying education be in a classroom for that very purpose. If you come into the business and you don't know the basics of it, then you're having to reteach everything that should have been learned in the classroom. That's one of the reasons, like with the university that I'm doing, we have a lot that has to be read, because before you can do anything else, they can monitor and they know what you've read and how much you've read. If they put a video, they know what you've watched, how much you've watched. They can go down and see what kind of discussions that you're doing, and for you to prove that you've read what they've told you to read. You'll see some students in there, they'll post additional online sources within the discussion, and that's not what we find out that's not what he wanted. He had posted things specifically for you to read, and those students weren't reading that. They were trying to find the faster way out. And they weren't learning what he was trying to get them to learn. So there's a lot of cutting corners that's taking place in there. And that's one of the things that with the platforms that we're talking about, you talk about universities and the fact that their education isn't, inferior because it's online, and that's true, but it is at least the one that I'm taking is very rigorous, very involved. You can't go a day without being involved in some form of reading, some form of writing, some form of submission. All exams are on a lockdown, so it locks down your entire system. You have to have a webcam to show around the room in order to show who's in the room, which nobody's allowed to be in there. You have to show what materials are in front of you so that you're not cheating. If at any point you make a sudden move, somebody walks in like they did on me during the exam, you have a kid walk in, it flags that moment in time, and when they go back they review and see what happened at that particular time. So it's a very big system that they've spent hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars developing. And I found this to be true with a couple of other master's students from other universities. It's a big program, and I don't know that any of the providers that are present right now really have that.
Once you get completed with your online degree, will you need to be apprentice under anyone?
Online degree, no.
No, okay.
Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Evans.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Next, we will have Mr. Michael Tankserly. I apologize if I butcher your name.
Appreciate y'all letting me have an opportunity here. I'm going to take a little different approach. I don't think online is the devil, but I do think as we get further along in our careers, as you're getting further along to your certification, it becomes more important to be in a classroom, especially for income capitalization, things like that. It's in your complex coursework. What I would like to see you do, instead of being just, say, any 50% of your hours for qualifying education, I would like to be more specific and say, if you want to be a trainee in the state of Tennessee, you can take all of your online education for pre-licensing to get a trainee online. That allows anybody who wants to get in the industry to get in the industry at any time. They can immediately become a trainee. What that also does is it protects the public trust that as you get into more complex work, you have that interaction with the teacher. You have that where you've already got some experience and you can ask the questions. And I think being more specific instead of saying any 50% puts a little more I guess, structure to the process. Would hate to see someone get to 50% and then take everything online at the end. I think the last part of both the residential and the certified general coursework are extremely important and get to be kind of complex and detailed. The other thing that I would suggest is that if someone fails an online course for 2 or 3 times, that they be forced to go back into the classroom, because apparently that framework and that provider type material is not working. So that would be my suggestion.
Any questions?
Are you saying that for the qualifying education courses and the continuing education courses, or just QE?
So what I'm suggesting is that if you want to become a trainee in the state of Tennessee, you can take principles, procedures, 15-hour USPAP, and your trainee course online. After that, any other course should be, because the paths split. Residential goes one direction, certified general goes another. At that point, when it gets more complex. I understand you're with the supervisor, but what you learn in that classroom helps the supervisor train you. And if it's not learned well, the trainer is going to have a hard time getting you through the process. So as far as continuing education, we've already got 50% online. I've taken a lot of online courses for continuing education, mostly when I need to either recertify with an organization, or if it's a property specific that's not being offered somewhere nearby and I need to know more, I'll go to the online providers and take those courses. So I think they have a good product, but when you're training for this, I do think it's much more difficult to get through the process as it gets more complex after the training.
What else? Thank you, Mr. Tanksley. Ms. Matlock, if you don't mind, and it doesn't, how many more speakers do we have?
2 more.
All right, let's just go ahead and have the speakers. We were going to take a break, but if that's all we have, let's just go ahead and get them.
I do have some more to read afterwards, so if you'd like to take a break, we should take one now.
Okay. We're going to take a 10-minute break.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're back on the record. Ms. Matlock, you're up again.
Next on the list, we have Mr. Brian Reynolds. Mr. Reynolds, are you still present and wish to comment on the proposed rules today?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Morning. Thank you very much for the opportunity to address the commission. My name is Brian Reynolds. I'm a certified general appraiser within the Commonwealth of Kentucky. I also hold a certified general appraisal credential in the good state of Tennessee. I'm an AQB certified USPAP instructor, and I am an educator. I was an investigator for the state of Tennessee for a couple of years. I love Tennessee. I also love the appraisal profession. If you've met me, you know I'm somewhat of an excitable guy. I'm passionate about what I do. I love what I do. And this profession has been very good to me. And I think that as we get a little later in our career, we need to give back to our profession. And that's what I'm trying to do at this point in time. Hopefully my career is not over anytime soon. But I have a couple of cards here. And Mr. Chairman, if it's okay, I'd like to present you folks with a couple of cards. They're blank. There's nothing dangerous, nothing up my sleeve. So if you could just take one of these blank cards, and I'd like for each of you to just fold it in half, if you don't mind. Fold those in half for me, if you don't mind. And when you fold it in half, make sure you fold it in half the correct way, like this. I'm just kidding, it doesn't matter. I'll get back to this in a minute. What I'd like for you to do on each side after you fold it, on one side I want you to write, "Let's eat Grandma." So just write, "Let's eat Grandma," if you don't mind. I'll give you a second to do that. On the other side of the card, after you write, "Let's eat Grandma," I want you to write, "Thanks for calling me back!" exclamation point. Okay? Now, the reason I have you do that is those are just words on a piece of paper right now, much like you would see words on a computer screen. There's no emotion behind those. And if I say, let's eat Grandma, sounds like we're going to eat her, as opposed to saying, let's eat Grandma. Now, maybe you get an emoji or a punctuation or something like that that helps out, but you can't get that in reading text. You can't get the emotion or the passion or the emphasis. You know, I'm sad to report that a lot of credentialed appraisers throughout the United States, a lot of certified appraisers, can't tell you what creates value. That's pretty sad. That's pretty sad if you're in the hot seat and you're asked, are you a valuation expert? And of course you're going to say yes. And then a follow-up question might be, well, great, what's the four economic influences that create value? And they can't answer that question. It's a little embarrassing. In a live classroom setting, I'm going to emphasize these four economic influences. I'm not going to have you memorize it for the test on Friday. See, we've got a lot of appraisers that have been disciplined. We've got a lot of appraisers that are challenged, and I blame the educators. I blame the educational process. You know, one of these proposed amendments are changing the supervisor's requirement. Well, let me tell you something. I've got a lot of trainees that end up training their trainers. Because when I have a student and now they really grasp, they don't memorize what creates value, they have a good understanding of it. When I'm done with them, they may go back and educate their supervisor. And we all have things to learn, right? I'm passionate about learning. So I'm rejecting this as the way it's written. I recommend you do as well. I will say this, I teach live classes, but guess what? I'm a partner in an online company as well. So what you do here really doesn't impact me that much personally, because if I don't sell it to you one way, I'll sell it to you the other, all right? We provide online CE courses. We don't do the QE yet, but we may eventually. What we're trying to do is do things a little different. We like that personal interaction with the instructor. And so all of our online are very video enriched. I'm personally looking at now the virtual reality stuff. I'd love to do a live classroom and have the opportunity to say, hey, we got a bus out front, and we're going to take a field trip this afternoon to a manufactured home plant. We're going to show you how they put these things together. And while it's not practical for me to pull a bus up and load everyone up and take them physically, maybe we could put these things on and do a virtual reality where we do walk through a plant together. So those are some of the changes that I'm trying to see if we can implement that would make a difference with that educational process. Let me tell you this, I do have some firsthand knowledge of what many of the appraisers in Tennessee want. Because quite frankly, I just ask them. You know, that's a recognized technique in appraisals, isn't it? A survey method, a survey technique. And I know Tennessee did that many years ago when this very issue came up before. So I've been asking appraisers, what do you guys think? Without voicing my opinion to the classroom, I gather their opinion. And I'll just say the majority is let's leave things the way they are. Let's leave it the way it is. And I wish I would have recorded those for you and had those available, but I did not. I was tardy on that. But I will say I have firsthand knowledge that the general consensus was leave it the way it is. All right? The one thing that I would like to add, I would recommend a modification to the rules. There was a gentleman that called me, and actually the former executive director had contacted me, and this gentleman was bedridden. So he had a challenge with trying to actually physically get the 50% live course. I tried to make arrangements to go to his house and teach him one-on-one so that he could renew his credential, and sadly we weren't able to coordinate that. I'm really not sure what happened with that individual, but I would highly recommend this commission consider making an exception to someone that has an illness or is bedridden and they're not physically able to get to a venue, that you would allow them to take their CE all 28 hours online. One of the responses from one individual said, well, if he can't get out of bed, how's he going to do appraisal work? Well, he can certainly mentor, he can do review work, he can do consulting work. We've got to think outside the box. There's many opportunities that he could do from the bed, right, without physically going and looking at a property. So I would highly recommend an exception be made if someone is bedridden, that we allow that they can secure that 28 hours to maintain their credential if they're not able to actually physically get to a location. I hear the old saying a lot, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I don't know if it's broke or not. I don't know what brought this to your attention and why we're here today talking on this particular issue. Is there good support to show that there is a needed change? I don't know. One gentleman that wrote in, I believe the executive director said they had the difficulty of finding classes and locations and whatnot. And I know that's been a challenge. I traveled back in the day many years ago when I got credentialed. I will say this, we are now offering live classes in Knoxville, Nashville, Murfreesboro, and Memphis, QE courses. Like the other gentleman from an educational provider said, the economics do come into play. Sometimes if you have one person or two people show up, you've got to make a tough decision. But I will say that when we offer a course, we try really, really, really hard not to cancel that. In fact, what we will do is typically contact the enrolled student and say, well, we don't really want to cancel, but you're the only one showing up. So could we just schedule that out maybe a couple of other weeks, and we won't cancel that one. We're just going to try and get some other folks to come. A lot of times we'll teach some of those classes and just not take a paycheck. I'm sympathetic. I am an appraiser. I'm a practicing appraiser. I'm certified general, but my roots are residential. I am a residential appraiser. And so I'm very sympathetic to the appraiser that has the challenges in finding a class or getting the renewal at the last minute. The last thing I've got here is the other statement I had you right. Thanks for calling me back. That was from 2014. I had an appraiser. I'll just say his name was John, because his name was John. And he called me up and tried to reach me, and I was actually visiting with my daughter. And I said, hey, I can't take your call. I'm with my daughter. He said, I've got to be in court tomorrow morning. Please call me. I tried to call him back after I dropped my daughter back at her home, and John didn't answer the phone. The next morning at 7 o'clock in the morning, I got a text message. And it said, thanks for calling me back, exclamation point. Now, what did that mean? Was he being, kind of smart? Or was he genuinely thanking me? Thanks for calling me back. I had no idea. And that's the problem with words on a screen without some passion or emotion or emphasis. Now, I get it. Online's coming. I'm part of an online team. We're trying to do things a little different. We're bringing the instructor or the developer into the studios here in Nashville, Tennessee, and we're putting a video camera on them so that they can get that passion and somewhat interaction with the online learner. For the QE, we're developing opinions of value. We're talking about public trust. I was just in a roundtable event with Fannie Mae down in Las Vegas, and they had a lot of folks in the room, and they're talking about different appraisal techniques and having different people do the inspection and so on and so forth. And one of the consensus is, how can we make the appraisal process faster, and how can we make it cheaper? And I said, let's not do either. Sometimes maybe we need to push back and say, this is typically a consumer's biggest asset of their life. Maybe asking for the valuer to develop a credible opinion of value in 2 days is just not realistic. Maybe we should push back, and maybe we should push back on this issue at this time. That's all I have. If you have any questions for me.
Anybody have any questions, Mr. Reynolds?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Jim.
Please.
I have several. Thank you for coming, Mr. Reynolds. Do you do QE for general as well as residential?
At this time, we do not. We have just expanded to offer QE for everything that's needed to become certified residential.
And you offer those multiple times a year?
Yes, sir, we do. We
How
offer them
often?
in multiple locations throughout the state of Tennessee.
Say the principal's course, how often do you offer that in a year?
I think we're offering that at least on a quarterly basis now.
Is that in different locations? Would you offer it multiple times in one location?
We have done that. You know, Nashville is a central location. We'll have folks from Knoxville come up. We have folks from Arkansas come to Nashville to take that principal's class. But as I bring on additional instructors, we are trying to have that in different venues. We have a trainee bundle, if you will, that we're offering down in South Haven, and that's right next door to Memphis, obviously.
How often, you said you try not to cancel, but how often do you cancel in a year?
You know, that's a hard question. I don't want to give any wrong information, but it's very seldom. I mean, I would say 1 in 15 maybe classes that we cancel.
One of the complaints that we hear, or one of the reasons for online, is that courses are either not offered or when they are offered, they're canceled.
Okay.
So you would speak against that?
Most certainly. I would say those folks that have made that comment probably don't know I exist. So we're trying to do a better job of being visible, Mr. Atwood, on that. We've got a Facebook page. Last week, our website went live. So, you know, we've been around for a few years doing it, but unfortunately, everyone doesn't know about us, and we're trying to do a little bit better job with that.
Doc?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, you mentioned you were CG in Kentucky?
Yes, sir.
And Kentucky is a state that does allow online QE and CE.
Yes.
Do you see any problems there in Kentucky?
You know, sadly to say, I don't teach as much in Kentucky. I started teaching in Tennessee over a decade ago for another provider. Kind of got a little following here. This is really my second home. I'm here probably more than I am there. And so I just started the focus and emphasis here. So we just started in Kentucky a couple of years ago. And we're not offering the QE in Kentucky yet. Kentucky's a little different. The requirements to offer QE there is different. We've just submitted application because we are getting inquiries for the QE in Kentucky in a live setting, and we actually have Kentucky residents, Kentucky trainees come to Nashville to take QE. So we will be offering that in Kentucky. We just started, actually, our very first supervisor trainee class is coming up in a couple of weeks, I believe, in Kentucky.
Anyone else? Mr. Reynolds, did I understand you to say you don't offer QE anywhere online?
That's correct. Appraiser e-learning, in which I'm a partner, we do not offer that online. I think we just added a link on our website for the states that allow it to take it through a secondary provider.
Ernie? Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Next, we have Mr. Randy Button.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Randy Button, I represent the Appraisal Institute here today. I feel a little bit disadvantaged because I'm the last person here and I have to follow the dynamic Brian Reynolds. I feel like maybe Aretha Franklin just preceded me, and I have to get up here and now perform. I tend to agree with a lot of things they've said here, so I don't want to reiterate a lot of dialogue that's been presented before you previously. A few things I do want to talk about, though, some things we favor in this proposal that's before you today. We do favor the 4 hours, reducing the supervisory training to 4-hour course from the current course. I think that allows more supervisors to be able to participate in this, maybe in a half-a-day setting. Also allowing both supervisors and trainees to take that online, I think would be a great venue to be able to present that. We also favor allowing the trainees to complete 50% of their CE requirements while they're trainees through an online provider, similar to what's allowed now for credentialed appraisers. One thing that we do oppose, we think at this point, is allowing any of the 50% of the qualifying education, either for either certification or license, to be taken online. And a lot of the reasons have been stated here in correspondence and in person by previous speakers. I wanted to, I thought Mr. Tankersley had a good suggestion as well about allowing more people to get into the profession. We have now lowered some of the requirements. We can see that with the number of people that are applying, and I think that's all good for the profession. Also encouraging people, especially supervisors, to be willing to take on trainees. We hear that a lot, that people, they go take the courses, but then they can't find someone to allow them to work under. I think by some of the things that you've proposed here, by lowering the hours of supervisory training, allowing those supervisors to now do that from their office instead of having to wait. So today, if the supervisory training class wasn't offered next year, if I wanted to take a trainee on, I would have to wait till next year before they could even start accumulating any of their experience. So I think there are some really good provisions and things that you guys have thought about here. One thing that Dr. McCara brought up earlier was the interaction in students, and how does that differ from the classroom setting versus an online. Most of the classroom classes that I have been involved with have case studies. So we're talking about the person that sits in the back of the room that doesn't really participate even in a classroom setting. If the course is structured correctly, and I think there's a lot of good providers out there that are providing these specific case studies where they have to work either in groups and solve a problem. I know Mr. Atwood teaches courses that requires in residential them to actually work through the problem as a group. And that's, I think that's very beneficial to what we do as professionals once we become credentialed, is we're out there asking questions, doing research, solving a problem. And so I think you get that from in class, not necessarily online where you're actually just operating in that environment where you're not interacting at all with your peers or the instructor. One of the other things I think that comes out of courses, this was brought up just earlier and I hadn't even thought about this, and Bill Medley and I were talking, was review. I know most courses, most course providers, I know Brian Reynolds does this, I know Mr. Atwood does this in his courses, and I try to do this as well, is we have a review time prior to taking the exam for the course, where you let students ask the questions. So if they had problems with certain area, understanding certain methodology or certain parts of the material, that they can ask those questions. Then you go through a review process that gets them better prepared, takes out some of the, the fear of taking that class, that they really do understand the material. And I think that's one of the benefits also of in class, especially for qualifying education. We heard earlier also that 5 states now will not allow qualifying education to be taken online, but some of the bordering states do. And I think the comment was a portion of qualifying education was able to take online. Maybe not half of all of it, but a portion of it could be taken online, like the supervisory training, maybe some of the introductory courses where once they get to the additional courses, they're taking income, some of that's repeated of what they should have learned in principles and maybe even procedures, the introductory classes. So I think that could be beneficial. Also, I think one thing that was brought up, I think by Mr. Bennett earlier, was how many appraisers actually go out and take these courses again. And I think that Mr. Reynolds talked about this as well. Sometimes the trainees are actually training the appraisers. I know personally, I have taken some of those courses. Sometimes you're required to, with the Appraisal Institute, you're required to set in on any course that you're going to teach, and they also require us to make a higher percentage on the test. We have to take the exam before we can even teach the class. So sometimes you have experienced instructors in there that are doing instructor audits, but also the Appraisal Institute requires for your continuing education, when you renew your credential, it's required that you take something other than a 7-hour course. So you have to take at least one of those in your 5-year credentialing period. So a lot of times we have appraisers that are in these courses as well. They're experienced appraisers that are taking these courses, and it's not just for disciplinary reasons. So we do have, I think we do have opportunities for that interaction in the classroom with experienced appraisers. Of those comments that I've made, I just want to close with this, and I'll be glad to answer any questions, but I believe Tennessee's came a long way. We have one of the best regulatory environments, I think, in the country. Arrow always recognizes us, and it's because of the contributions that we've made that are not just spur of the moment. They're very thoughtful. We think these things out, how it impacts not only the profession, but how it impacts the public, which we have that interest that we have to look at as well. So I applaud this commission from the onstart. We've always been kind of a leader, and I think we're still a leader on this issue that we're talking about today. I think we see the benefits. We see that things are changing. We do want to give people opportunities to get in the profession. We don't want to be a profession in 5 or 10 years from now of a bunch of 70-year-old gray-headed folks that are ready to retire.
I resent that, by the way.
And I'm pushing that. I'm pushing that. But what I'm saying is, we want to see people being willing to come into our profession. We want to see our profession grow. All of us are here. You're donating your time to make this profession better. As instructors, I think they're giving something back, as Brian Reynolds said earlier. You get to a certain point in your career where you have these experiences. I've made a lot of mistakes. If I can teach people to not make those mistakes that I made, maybe they'll be better appraisers than I ever thought about being. So I think those are things that we kind of have blazed a trail. We've got a great commission. We've got a great regulatory environment. I want to see us continue that. So as we make a decision here today, I hope you'll think about how this impacts not only our profession, the quality of our profession. We're very fortunate. We have really good appraisers in Tennessee. But how we also protect the public and the public interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Button. I will now give the commission an opportunity to respond to those comments directly on the record.
Any questions?
I always speak first. I guess I'll do it again. Mr. Button, do you represent the Appraisal Institute nationwide, international, or a local chapter?
I represent the local chapter as their government relations consultant.
How many members are in that chapter?
300 members.
They're all basically Tennesseans.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
But you're aware that through chat rooms and other technological improvements that group projects are something that are used in academic classrooms and so forth online?
I am aware of that. I think the one thing that I was wanting to talk about specifically on the case studies is it gives the instructor an opportunity to walk around the room, and I know Mr. Atwood and I actually teach procedures, so we have some case studies. I have these in other courses as well, where we can walk around the room helping the class, because one group will be hung up on one thing, another group will be hung up on something else. In an online environment, that's almost impossible to be able to alleviate. So I think that's, when I was talking about the peer interaction, I think that's very beneficial because they're going to get back as their career goes forward. They're going to have to work with their supervisor. They're going to have to work with other people possibly in their office. They're They're going to have to work with other professionals, whether those are attorneys, engineers, architects. They're going to have to learn how to do those things. And I think that's part of the learning environment.
And more of that communication between the people and their experts or by online, not online, but by electronic means, computer, email, things like that.
Yeah, sometimes it is, but there's certain things that I've learned in this profession that you just can't communicate online. Sometimes you can't even communicate it over the phone. Sometimes you have to sit down face to face and work things through. That happens all the time, especially in litigation, in the litigation settings. It also works even in the review process. In fact, I've got an appointment tomorrow. I'm sitting down with an appraiser. There's no way I could have communicated this really online with emails, or probably even over the phone. It's going to be better if he and I sat down, we go through this face to face to be able to solve the issue.
A lot of the issues that we've been discussing here, of course, if we look at higher education and even secondary education, we're also discussed that this would never work, that we could never do classes online on programs, whole graduate programs and undergraduate programs online. And somehow we have managed to do that, and the quality is still pretty good.
No, I think absolutely. I think Mr. Evans probably did a really good job of talking about that, his personal experiences with this, with getting his master's degree. And the technology, the platform is so important. The universities have invested hundreds of thousands, probably millions of dollars in developing these platforms. I don't think our profession is there yet. I think we will get there. We're working toward it. And I think we will get up to speed. But I'm not sure that we're there in the providers and the information that I've seen at this point that we're there yet. But a synchronous environment is where we're going.
Mr. Button, you are you stating that you don't think any QE, or the Appraisal Institute doesn't think that any QE is appropriate?
I think that's
online.
I think that's our position at this point, with the exception of the continuing education for trainees at this time, as well as the supervisory training class. If you're allowing the supervisor to do it, you should allow also the trainees to do that. So not necessarily none, but certain segments. And I do think that there is a possibility that, and you guys have to make the decision on this, but I think what Mr. Tankersley said was a viable option. If you decide that maybe we need to do some of this, then let's structure it and look at what portion of that, not all. I would hate to see someone backload all of their online in the hardest courses that they need before they get their license certification. So pushing that forward to allow them to get into the process, I don't think is a bad idea.
The Appraisal Institute offers a lot of QE courses for on-demand and online learning.
We did.
Probably over 20, would you say?
I don't know. I think Mike may know. I don't know. There's
Okay.
I know one thing that we wish we had and we don't have is the basic courses, the principles and procedures in a synchronous environment. We have it in an online environment. We don't have it in a synchronous environment this time. Only the upper division, like advanced income, some of those.
Okay. I guess I'm a little confused why they're opposed to something. They don't feel like it's appropriate when they're offering it to other states and other students, but it's not good enough for us, but it's good enough for them.
Well, I think this is the decision was made. I'm here speaking for the local chapter, and I think in Tennessee we feel like that it's better served. I think the Appraisal Institute in general, I've talked to them at national on this. They have no position on this. They're going to offer courses. They know that being able to do that in a classroom setting is better. But many times if you're in Wyoming, Montana, some places like this, that people are very rural, then there's other opportunities for them to take those classes. And we've been teaching continuing education online for a lot longer than we have been qualifying.
I think they must take a position because they're offering the classes. So,
well, we're offering the classes, but I can tell you, I've talked to the government relations people in AI nationally, and they say we're not taking a position for or against. That's a state decision to make.
thank you.
What else? Thank you, Mr. Button. Ms. Matlock?
Thank you, Mr. Button. That concludes the list of individuals on the sign-in sheet. However, we do have 3 additional written comments that we will now have before the commission. Ms. Gamucio, will you please read the first written comment?
Yes, thank you. I have one that came in through my email, so you'll bear with me as my old eyes read my small phone in a minute, but we're going to do the ones in paper here first. This first email that was handed to us is from Ms. Larissa Wilson. Ms. Wilson writes, I would like to provide comments on the upcoming hearing. Tennessee appears to be behind other states when it comes to how education courses for appraisers should be handled. By not allowing any courses to be taken online has created not only a hardship for those of us trying to become certified, but has created a monopoly, as there is only one reliable course provider in Middle Tennessee. I am also a retired licensed real estate affiliate broker and have had the luxury of taking CE classes online. I agree that the first 75 hours, i.e. the principles, the procedures, USPAP, and supervisor trainee, should be taken in class only. But afterward, we should be allowed to take some classes online, and we should have a choice on which classes can be taken online. As a prime example, I just completed a site valuation / cost approach class and found this class difficult because we had 2 very different instructors, which made it extremely difficult to absorb the material. Secondly, there is a lot of material to cover and to be tested on in 2 days. And third, the exam was 85% math, and it takes more time to absorb and prepare for an exam of that nature by day 2. I would have loved to have had the option to study at home and then take the proctored test either online or at a proctor's site. I hope that this hearing passes so that trainees like myself can see our way into the new career without more barriers to entry. And this email was sent on August 28th.
Thank you, Ms. Gamucio. I would like to give the commission an opportunity to respond to those comments directly on the record.
Anyone want to comment?
Ms. Gamucio, will you please read the second written comment?
And this email is from August 29th. It is coming from Chris Graves, real estate appraiser, Red Anchor and Company. I believe that proposed changes are a very good idea. I got my CG license in 2017, so I just walked through the training process. And it is very difficult when most CG classes are a week long and out of the area. I had budgeted roughly $1,000 for each class. That is the class plus the hotel plus food, which is very difficult for a trainee who typically gets a small fraction of the appraisal fee. I think the upfront costs make entry to the appraisal field impossible for many, and I couldn't have done it without financial help from others. Allowing trainees to save on any costs such as travel is helpful. Plus, the online courses requires quizzes to show that you are paying attention and following along. The appraisal industry seems to be facing some significant challenges, banks trying not to require appraisals, increased regulations, aging providers, etc. And I think it is wiser for the state to try to ease the burden any way they can to encourage folks to enter the field. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gamucio. Will you please read the final written comment into the record, please?
Thank you. This email came in at 11:55 this morning. It is from Ms. Spencer Tenbarge, Tenbarge. Hello, Roxana. I have included my comments regarding the 50% online education requirements for CG licensing. Please see below. Good afternoon. My name is Spencer Tenbarge. I am currently a trainee with one course left, so this decision will affect me or my educational requirements. Will not affect me or my educational requirements. I apologize. However, I am in favor of online educations. As mentioned by the individual from McKissick, so this is an individual that was watching us. That's good to streaming online. The quality of education does not vary between online and classroom courses. Tennessee is one of the last states that does not accept online education, but keep in mind that if we did, the courses that individuals could take would be the same courses offered in other states, meaning these courses would be under the same regulations. Additionally, one is required to have a college degree before receiving their certified general license, but there is no regulation behind whether that degree must be acquired through online courses or classroom courses. To further my example, a lawyer who obtained his degree from an online institute is probably never questioned as to where they received their degree, but rather they passed the bar to get to this point of their career. In summation, everyone learns differently. The incoming generation of appraisers will most likely have taken a portion of their education online. The point of the education is to be able to pass a test that confirms that we understand and comprehend the material. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gamusio. This concludes the comment period. The comment period has concluded. As there is no necessity to hold the comment period for any additional time based on sufficient notice and the opportunity to comment here today. At this time, as required by Tennessee Code Annotated Section 4-5-222, we will need 3 separate motions and roll call votes to adopt the following: the hearing rule language, the regulatory flexibility addendum / economic impact statement, and the impact on local government statement. Pursuant to TCA Section 4-5-228. First, we will need a motion to adopt the hearing language presented today.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and second that we adopt the language that was printed today. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, I need to understand they made a motion for what's written here, right?
Yes,
Okay.
that is correct.
That's the motion on the floor. Thank you.
Exactly like it's written.
As written.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, or legal, is it possible for us to discuss this in sections rather than as a whole? In other words, can we take the proposal for the supervisor trainee and discuss it separately? Can we take the 50% and discuss it separately and even vote separately? Is it one for all for one, or can we do it separately?
I can't answer that, so I'm going to turn it over to legal. And I think
So the motion is for this hearing language as written. If this motion fails, then we'll have to do it separately.
Thank you.
All right, you've heard from legal. We have a motion on the floor and a second that we accept it just as written. Any further discussion? Ready to vote?
By roll call.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Correct?
Yes, correct.
All right, and just as a point of clarification, we're voting on this just exactly as it's written.
That is correct.
Okay.
All parts.
In its entirety, yeah.
And if you have questions about any pieces, I guess we can ask the questions, but as the motion stands, the question would be like to legal if you misunderstood something, but as it
Okay.
stands, we're voting. Randall Thomas.
No.
Warren McCara.
Yes.
Mr. Rex Garrison,
No.
Mr. Jim Atwood,
No.
Mr. Jason Bennett,
Yes.
Mr. Brett Mansfield,
No.
and Ms. Michelle Alexander.
No.
Okay, so the motion has failed. I will let you.
Okay, so now we're going to go over it in the three sections. Am I correct there?
If you'll give me one moment, please.
Sure.
So we will have to take this part by part, and if there are any amendments, we'll have to do this and then resubmit the paperwork. I would like to remind the commission that a majority of the rules are just moving these locations and amendments into separate from a location into another location. Some of them are different changes. So let's proceed with, if you look on your red line copy, page 3.
Give me a minute. I will give you the number on your iPads for page 3 if you can. It should be on your iPad on page 53. Is that correct?
Yes, and if you would like a paper copy, we have those as well.
We need to proceed.
You may proceed.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, what's in front of you right now is to vote on the 150-hour, no more than 50% via internet or distance learning, or for the qualifying education. Do I hear a motion that we approve or disapprove the first section, which has to do with the 50% qualifying education?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion that we accept 50% online education.
Second.
We have a motion and second that we accept the 50% online education. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, just a point of clarification. This is for state license only. As I understand it, this is for the state license only.
You lost me, right? But
Right there.
right, but understand.
It's not for certification, residential, or if we're taking this individually, it says only for the state license designation.
You've got the 3 layers, the licensed, the certified general, certified residential.
Okay, so we're doing this one at a time for those 3.
Unless
Look,
the commission would like to propose an amendment and a motion dealing with it differently, but right now, based on the page, this is just the license.
Okay.
we could speed this up.
Okay, we do have a motion and a second on the floor that we accept the 50% education for licensee, just like it's written. Any further discussion? Ready to vote?
By roll call, so give me just a minute. Thank you. Mr. Randall Thomas?
No.
Mr. Mark Johnston's not here, I apologize. Mr. Warren McCara?
Yes.
Dr. McCara. Mr. Rex Garrison?
No.
Mr. Jim Atwood?
No.
Mr. Brent Barron? I'm sorry, Mansfield?
No.
Mr. Jason Bennett?
Yes.
And Ms. Michelle Alexander?
No.
Okay. So no change if we proceed along these lines.
Okay, so we want to do the trainee next? Or do we want to go, we want to clarify the licensee?
As opposed to going on and by each one of these, can we get into discussion and try to come to a resolution?
All right, Chair entertains discussion. Mr. Garrison, obviously.
Well, for starters, last week, 3 commissioners sat in a meeting with some bankers, TAF, ASC, and it comes from a bank that here in Tennessee we all know over the past year, TriStar Bank, and there is a push to get more people into the industry. Education is oddly enough, over the years, I've been doing it a long time, most of the issues revolve around experience, not so much education. It is a barrier to entry. I did not anticipate us discussing education this soon, but last year at an Aero conference, it was in Tampa, and if I would have known we were going to be discussing this within a year, I would have jotted down the gentleman's name and state they were from. But the one thing he brought up in a breakout session was it was in a rural state. They allow 100% qualifying ed, and they have done it for long enough that they had enough data to go back and look at those that had complaints filed, and the people that they saw before them, a large percentage of them took their online education 100% online. So with that, I think we need to proceed with caution. I think 50% is quite a bit. 50%, as you look at it, as we go up from trainee to license to all the way up to certified general, 50% of the certified general is 150 hours, and that's quite a bit of hours online. And so we need to proceed with caution. Another thing that I thought about this morning, hearing all these comments, and it's something that we haven't discussed, is the approval of online qualifying ed. If we do this, how is that going to, and this would go to Dr. McCara, how are we going to approve the instructor? How are we going to approve the process? And so we're not prepared necessarily for that, are we?
Well, I think you raise a good point. And I think that if we are going to approve allowing qualifying education by online, that the application form itself would need to be changed. And the instructor would need to indicate how he or she or they are going to involve students in discussion and other aspects that have been raised as questionable parts of online education. I do think that that's a direction we're going to be moving in. I think it's interesting that we took this up, I guess it was about 3 or 4 years ago. And if it doesn't pass this time, I have a feeling we're going to be talking about this 3 or 4 years from now. And online education will probably have changed. But, you know, I've thought a lot about this over that period of time, and I thought that to a certain extent it's going to become a heavier burden for the person who is the education commissioner to be able to evaluate the quality of courses that are online. But I think it's a direction we need to be going, and maybe some more work needs to be done in terms of how we would demonstrate, how the provider would demonstrate, how they would, include discussions and other things like that that have been pointed out by some of our people who have talked to us today. We've gotten a very good array of people, both in person and then also by message. But I think it's a direction we're going to be moving in, and I think that's how we might be able to ultimately deal with that, Mr. Garrison.
Further discussion?
Mr. Chair, this proposal's already been defeated. I suggest we move on to the next one.
Well, where I was going with this is our normal meeting when this was brought up. I think we had about 5 commissioners at that meeting, and at that meeting I was in a minority of speaking against online education. But one thing that I did bring up was sort of looking at the trainee courses as far as offering them online. It would also allow us to ease into this. We can sort of hash out some of the issues as far as approving the courses and so forth, but it would also address, because we are, and the reason I brought up the meeting last week, we are under a microscope for the country as far as barriers to entry. Because of TriStar Bank, all eyes are upon Tennessee, and I recognize going not allowing any online education at this point would be difficult to do without some kind of pushback. But I would rather see us move with caution and do a portion of it, do the trainee side of it. That's the 75 hours, 4 hours online, and so to sort of lower the barrier to entry, and we get trainees in. We already have, and we're already experiencing the qualifying ed, or the experience ed change. The experience, lowering the experience. We're seeing a number of applicants. So if we start lowering the education, I think we need to be cautious. But that's where I would like to see it go. I agree with Dr. McCara in the sense of if we don't address it here, we're going to be addressing it again. But I would rather proceed with caution and move slowly on it. I teach a class at ETSU, and oddly enough,
for my class,
and oddly enough, just last week, I overheard a couple of students talking, and one of the students mentioned she wished she took the room class as opposed to online because she would have got more out of it. And so, and that triggered because, this is a hot topic for us, but that's a college student wishing that she attended the class as opposed to taking it online. So I think we need to proceed with caution.
All right, Mr. Garrison.
Is my point.
Can I make another comment?
No. Yeah, sure.
Okay. I was just going to say that I find it interesting. I think, because I teach an online class, and I think some students take online classes because they think they're going to be easier. And what they find is they're very surprised that it's a lot harder to take the class online than it is to take it live. One other point, and I don't know whether we want to discuss this or not, but is one of the problems that it's a 50%? Suppose we backed off on that, 25% or something like that.
I think it goes back that we need to be selective on what courses are allowed.
I agree with that.
Because if you say 50%, just like the comment said, if they backload it, they're going to take the more difficult ones. And that's why I say, let's start out easy. Let's look at the trainee that allows them to get in the door and it allows them to be marketable, to get hired, to get the experience. But I think that is a reasonable compromise at this point.
So are you saying that we should just specifically identify the courses that we think should be allowed?
Yes, yeah, and that covers all levels. You know, so we're covering all of them. It's the same hours for a CG as it is for a CR, and so it's fair across the board. But it at least allows them to gain entry into, if travel is an issue. And I've traveled this country, taking classes. It is not a matter of going to take a class with a peer. I have met my peers. I have kept those relationships over the years. And when I have an appraisal issue come up, I could pick up the phone and call them and see how they would handle it. That networking system is priceless in this industry because we as appraisers work independently, and there's a lot of firms out there that don't have many appraisers, and to be able to pick up the phone and network is priceless, and that's how those networks are created.
So you have a proposal on which classes, specifically Mr. Tankersley's idea from earlier? Is that something that we're looking at?
That's what I suggested, going all the way back to the last one.
So how would we set that forth to say we're proposing these specific classes in lieu of just 50%?
I think on the portion that deals, the beginning of the rule change that deals with the qualified education, it's broken down by licensed, certified general, certified residential, because the statute points them out that way. So
It's not broken down by course.
correct.
Okay.
But if on your iPads on page 58, for example, we're looking at the 75-hour course that Mr. Garrison mentioned. If the motion on the table would be to specifically allow certain courses to be online, and the full commission or a majority votes on it, then, you know, Anna, bless her heart, this is her first meeting with us, so she's got her work cut out, but we will have to bring this all back, obviously. It can't, there's going to be a lot of amendments, right? I mean, there's just no way to make it easy.
Is this something, let me ask you something, is this something that we need to maybe put a work group together or a task force together and say, you know, these courses are okay and these courses are not okay? It looks to me like there's some work that needs to be done.
I think that's certainly within the commission's purview. We can set this for discussion at the next meeting to see if you have ideas how to proceed with these rules. Like if you want the specific courses not to be allowed online, we can figure out a way to maybe incorporate it that way. I'm not, at this point, we would have to, we cannot vote on, we have a vote that these rules have failed. So we will need to amend those at some point, possibly in the future. But if you have ideas, that can certainly be something that we can put onto the January agenda.
Okay, so what we voted on is just the licensee at this point. Am I correct?
Well, we have a vote for the entire rules that failed, and then there was a vote for the licensees, and that failed as well. We can continue to go by the provisions, or you can just let us know which provisions you would like to keep and which you would not like to keep.
Okay. Mr. Mansfield.
So I think what Mr. Garrison recommended, the pre-licensing requirements are the same for all three. So
That can be a motion.
yes.
Correct, he did.
So I think that, just to clarify, I think that's what he was stating.
And what I explained is it would be filled in on each category of the rules, because our rules actually break it down by licensed, certified
Right.
general. So we'd have to still fill it in, but yes,
But-
his motion.
Right, and you don't actually have to choose a path at that point, so somebody can have a trainee's license and then figure out what direction they want to
Yes.
pursue.
And
So-
that
So
can be
we have voted down the licensee
as it was written.
as it was written. Okay, so now we need to take a vote on the certified residential. Is that correct?
Not unless that's something that you want to do. I think at this point, it probably would be beneficial if we just, if there are provisions that you would like to vote on specifically, to take those up at this time.
Okay. I'll open the floor then for discussion if there's any commissioner that wants to bring provisions up at this time, such as the supervisory or the, what is it, impact?
So
The regulatory flexibility addendum and the impact on local governments, those we cannot vote on as they are tailored specifically to these rules.
Okay.
So we cannot vote on those.
So we can vote
We're
on the
looking-
supervisory?
Yes, we can vote on the context and the substance of the amendments of these rules.
So we cannot bring a motion to change what we have in here redlined to say, instead of saying no more than 50% via internet or distance education, a motion to change that to include only appraisal principles, procedures, USPAP. Can we do that?
You can do that. I'm just the other information that I said beforehand, that we cannot vote on those parts. So we can
You'll have
do
to
it in
change
parcel.
those.
Yes, we'll have to change those.
And we can vote on those in January.
And we can bring it back and vote on everything as a whole in January.
Okay, so we can go ahead and vote on the supervisory, lowering it from 7 to 4.
Yes, we can
Okay.
go ahead and vote on that.
there's
Okay.
that piece. There's also the trainee continuing education, allowing 50% of that.
Okay.
And then the last piece that I think sort of confused a little bit, on the last page 60 of your iPads, was adding the 50% of continuing education to our appraisers. That's part of our statute. It's just in a very odd, this was more of a cleanup to bring it all in line with the continuing education.
Because we're doing that anyway.
Because we're
Yes.
doing it now.
Okay.
It's just in a very odd place that's hard and debatable for our licensees, and some skip it and think they have to take it all. So we wanted, since that particular rule was open, to bring it, to clean it up in the right place.
Okay,
That makes
all right.
sense.
At this point in time, then, the chair will entertain motions regarding the supervisory position.
Move to accept.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
All right, in case you don't know what we're accepting or what we're doing, we're moving from 7 hours to 4 hours for the supervisory class. Does everyone understand what we're voting on? Any discussion? Ready to vote? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry.
On your iPads, that's on page 60, and we are strictly voting on section that affects 12-1255-01-.12, section 10, letter G. And this is the supervisory course going from 7 hours to 4.
Correct.
All right. Mr. Randy Thomas?
Yes.
Dr. Warren McCara?
Yes.
Mr. Rex Garrison?
Yes.
Jim Atwood?
Yes.
Mr. Jason Bennett?
Yes.
Mr. Brett Mansfield?
Yes.
And Ms. Michelle Alexander?
Yes.
All in agreement. Thank you.
All right, that motion carries. Thank you. Now, let's turn, if it's okay, it might be out of line, let's turn to the 50% CE training for trainees. Or do we need to clear up the other one first? Okay, let's do the trainees since we're talking about it. We're going to entertain a motion to accept 50% CE training for trainees.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion?
I need to know where that is. Page 60?
What we'll be voting on, what we have on the floor is, we're going to be voting on to allow trainees to receive 50% of their continuing education online. Any further discussion?
It's on page 60.
Yes.
Rule 125501-.127. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Question,
Yes, sir.
what continuing education do trainees take?
They're required to take 28 hours. 7 of them are mandatory use PAPs. So of those 28 hours, just like any other real estate appraisers like yourselves, they would be allowed to take 50% of those. We do not tell them which ones. It would be 14 online if they so choose, or all of it in person. Okay?
When you say that, just for a point of clarity, I can take 21 contact hours and 7 online, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
the
okay.
most online
Right.
would be 50%.
Right, 50% the most, okay.
Right. And so our trainees have been not allowed to do that, whereas our other appraisers have.
Well, I have one other question.
Yes.
Their QE does not count as CE?
No.
They have to take CE in addition to QE?
That's a really good question. So if they are renewing and have taken their QE, they could count part of that as their renewal. So it can be counted in both places.
But if you are a trainee for a long period of time, you absolutely have to take CE.
Oh, yes, past the 2 years, so, yes.
So, until the rules just changed, everyone who was a trainee ended up having to do that.
We definitely do hear from those where that is made very difficult.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Any further discussion? Roxanne, do you need to take a roll call vote?
I need to know who made the motion, please.
I did.
Rex, thank you. And who seconded? Thank you. Okay. We have a first and a second allowing the trainee, and on your iPads, that is on page 60, and it is specifically Rule 1255-01-.12, Section 7, registered trainee to complete no more than 50 individuals required continuing education credits via internet or distance learning. Just want to make sure. Mr. Randy Thomas.
Yes.
Dr. Warren McCara.
Yes.
Rex Garrison.
Yes.
Jim Atwood.
Yes.
Jason Bennett.
Yes.
Brett Mansfield.
Yes.
And Michelle Alexander.
Yes.
Thank you. All approved.
All right, now, Ms. Matlock, you're going to have to help me, I guess.
Yes.
We can't vote on the flexibility or the impact, so we're going to vote on the last to clear up, and tell me what that is.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We are not voting on the regulatory
Right,
flexibility.
right, I understand that, but tell me what the last one that we're trying to clear up is.
It's on page 62 of your iPad.
62?
Yes, and this is already part of what is allowed. This is a cleanup, so this would be Rule 1255-04-.01 is amended by adding the paragraph Section 8. So we'd be adding a separate section here so that people aren't hunting for it somewhere else, because it was there.
So this is basically housekeeping.
Yes.
Exactly.
Okay. Everybody understand what we're,
It makes it confusing if it's not
right,
in the
everybody
section.
understand what we're doing? All right, do I entertain a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's been made and seconded that we include this paragraph as a matter of housekeeping for 1255-04-.01, Section 8. Any discussion? Roxana?
Thank you. Mr. Randall Thomas?
Yes.
Dr. Warren McCara?
Yes.
Mr. Rex Garrison?
Yes.
Mr. Jim Atwood?
Yes.
Mr. Jason Bennett?
Yes.
Mr. Brett Mansfield?
Yes.
Ms. Michelle Alexander?
Yes.
All approved. Thank you.
Are there any other provisions of the rules you would like to discuss today?
I have a question about Rule 1255-01-.12-7. It's on page 8 of the red line and 58 on the screen here, where the term classroom is crossed out. Has that already been approved, or do we have to move for that to be approved?
It is has not been approved, so we would need to vote.
I would move to approve that.
All right. And that has to do with continuing education, is
Yes,
that
it
correct?
does.
Okay. All right, everybody understand, we're talking about page 8, of the red line?
58 on your screen there.
All we're doing is clearing, that's just basically housekeeping, am I right?
That's for the trainee, isn't it? What we already took care of?
Not sure, that's why I asked Mr. Garrison.
I think we voted in favor of that.
Yeah, I think we voted on that already.
So this is specific to continuing education.
Yes.
So removing classroom would allow for online.
That's right.
And if you are okay with that, we can vote for it for continued education.
That's what I'm
Is that
proposing.
continuing
That's what I'm
education for
moving.
who?
Registered trainees.
Okay.
On a separate statute, you approved, I think the separate one, the 50%.
Yeah.
This gets rid of the word, right, classroom.
Okay, so this is housekeeping, basically. Okay, Doc, we have a motion on the floor. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, motion's been made and seconded. Do we remove classroom and add course? Any further discussion? Roxanna?
Randy Thomas,
Yes.
Dr. Warren McCara,
Yes.
Rex Garrison,
Yes.
Jim Atwood,
Yes.
Jason Bennett,
Yes.
Brent Mansfield,
Yes.
Michelle Alexander.
Yes.
Thank you. All in agreement, and this pertains to what is on your page 58, 8 of the rulemaking hearing document for continuing education with trainees, getting rid of the word.
So are we at a point now where we have said we're not allowing any online education at all for any QE? That's what we've said.
That is the current process.
And can we make amendments to that or now, or?
You can make amendments to that now or choose to wait till January. It is up to you, whatever you wish to do.
Okay, so we're still looking at, we're probably a year out by the time we get done with this,
So
realistically?
we would have to, we would need to have a discussion and vote on the rules. And then, so yeah, we're a little bit ways out.
Okay, so,
We'd have to start the process essentially over since we're resubmitting new rules.
okay, so the one thing that everybody is looking at us, we've defeated today, and it is the main complaint from the banking industry, and the reason that they're filing for appraisal waivers, we're not doing anything about.
I don't think it's their main complaint.
Now, it is what we definitely hear in the office a lot from our trainees, that they cannot afford the money, et cetera, and we read a couple of different statements, so, but not speaking on behalf of the banking issue, but what we hear, which is the reason we sort of discussed it in April, to come with a magical percentage for online if the
Okay,
commission decides.
So since we don't have this magical percentage and/or we voted it down, and it's going to be a year out anyway, why don't we, I would like to appoint a task force to look at this, to bring us back some meat and potatoes to some of the opinions that have been brought forth today, so that maybe in January we can discuss this a little further and say, hey, this is, we're going to go, and I don't have any idea, we're going to go 25% online, but you can only take these courses online. Can we do that?
Or does that have to be done in a public meeting?
So
Your meeting.
So if you do decide to create a task force, you can do that, but those meetings would have to be open to the public and streamed live. Those would also be probably separate and apart from the regular meetings that we have scheduled. You could potentially tack them on or after the meetings that we have scheduled for 2019. But we would have to vote for that, and it would have to be open to the public if you would like to do that.
We can't do anything between, we can't have those meetings between now and 2019? Is that what you're saying?
Also, we can do something before 2019. We could do a conference call.
How's a conference
meeting.
call open to the public?
Yes, we would be here and have it open on the record, as long as we give adequate notice for that meeting to take place, and then we can do a conference call and have a meeting beforehand if we can come up with a time for all of the commissioners to be able to attend, if that is what you like to do.
Bob, does that sound like something you would chair?
Chair?
Yeah.
I'd be happy to participate. I don't know about chairing.
All right. Mr. Garrison?
Can we take a little break?
You mean right now?
Yeah.
Sure, I guess. Take a 10-minute break?
Is that enough? Okay.
Yeah, take a 10-minute break. Sorry.
We'll come back in 10 minutes, take a break. Thank you.
Watch what you might be on the record.
Okay. Meeting back to order. Ms. Matlock, are we going to ask you to read a statement for us?
You can hold on one moment, please. Before we discuss more about the task force, I just wanted the commission to be aware of the reasoning that these rules were brought before you in the first place. According to Tennessee Code Annotated 6239-106, it states that no state law regulating real estate appraisers shall be more stringent than any federal law regulating real estate appraisers. And as the rules are currently, we are technically more stringent with not allowing online courses for the qualifying education. So my request to the commission at this time is, I know we discussed having a task force. If you could give the legal team a little bit of time to look at this statute and the federal statutes and come back and let you all know what we need to do to get within federal compliance. We can all, I think we had mentioned before, the task force wanting to do certain courses that you would like to limit. That's certainly within our purview. So if you would like to do that, you can start brainstorming and we can bring that back here. But I am just asking for a little bit more time to look at this and to consult with our client on this matter to see if we can get you a more clearer picture, because I think there was a little bit of miscommunication on the front hand.
Okay. Before we do anything with the task force,
Yes.
okay, is there anyone on the commission that wishes to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion. And this would relate to all trainees for license, certification, certified residential, and certified general. And the motion being that 79 hours, specifically consisting of 30 hours appraisal principles, 30 hours appraisal procedures, 15 hours USPAP, 4 hours appraiser trainee supervisor course. That totals 79 hours. Those 79 hours specifically can be taken online.
All right, we have a motion on the floor.
Second.
Wait, and a second. Now, discussion on the motion that's on the floor.
Could you repeat those courses?
Yes, it's... Is this on? Yeah. Appraisal principles is 30 hours. Appraisal procedures is 30 hours. USPAP is 15 hours, and the trainee supervisor course is 4 hours. We just voted for it to be 4 hours, for a total of 79 hours.
So the motion on the floor and seconded is not percentages, but hours and specific classes. Any further discussion? Ready to vote?
Would that meet the requirement that that we be no more stringent than the national?
Yes, that would.
Okay. Do we need a roll call vote on that, Roxana?
We do.
All right.
Thank you. Mr. Randall Thomas.
Yes.
Dr. Warren McCara.
Yes.
Mr. Rex Garrison.
Yes.
Mr. Jim Atwood.
Yes.
Bennett.
Yes.
Mr. Brett Mansfield.
Yes.
And Ms. Michelle Alexander.
Yes.
Motion carries. We don't need to form a task force then. Okay?
That's thank you. We'll go ahead and work on these rules and look at, talk to the client and everything and bring this back to you all in January just to make sure that everything is okay and good to go.
Okay, now
Is that
between now and
okay?
January, there's enough time for you to do this?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Who's a client? I may be dumb here, but who's a client?
Roxana.
Okay.
Do we have any other business?
No, there's no other business at this moment. I would like to conclude the rulemaking hearing. Other than that,
I move we adjourn.
Adjourn. We need, yes.
Hang on. Okay. Is there something else?
Based on our agenda, we left if we had any unfinished business to make sure that we could address it, but everything got done yesterday at the meeting, and I think we've motioned for our interviews. Are we good?
And everything is kosher with legal?
Everything's good. We have one motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor, leave. Thank you.